A young man eyes a floating structure, wondering about becoming a powerful lord. Outside a bustling tavern, someone approaches and asks to have a serious talk. The scene immediately shifts to Iga, who listens closely to the unfolding conversation. Iga addresses his companion Cross directly, indicating he is ready to hear his thoughts. Sitting at the bar, the companion remarks they finally reached their current destination. Cross laughs cheerfully as the companion states his ambition to defeat the Demon King isn't enough. The atmosphere grows heavy as the companion admits he is considering reorganizing their current party. He explains apologetically that some members don't fit the quest and might become an impediment. Looking down solemnly, he affirms his awareness of the harsh reality and asks for understanding. Noting his friend's sad expression, he gently urges Cross not to make a sorrowful face. With a sad smile, Cross shockingly asks his friend Iga to quit the adventuring party. A flashback reveals the pair 6 years ago at Magic College promising to become best adventurers. Young Cross expresses boredom, yearning to discover the world, fight enemies, and recruit a hesitant Iga. Cross dramatically complains about hating strict rules and firmly vows he will never get used to them. Iga tries to hide his quiet laughter while a flustered Cross demands to know what is funny. Cross insists he is completely serious, though Iga secretly admits he shared the exact same dream. Cross passionately outlines intense desires to be successful, respected, wealthy, and free from harsh royal control. Cross boldly asks Iga to join him, leaving Iga bewildered by such crazy and ambitious thoughts. Reaching a decisive turning point, they agree to aim for the absolute apex of the adventurer career. With unwavering determination, Cross confidently declares that the two of them will finally start their grand journey. Iga clearly recalls how magic school professors desperately begged him to abandon this foolish adventurer idea. He reflects that adventuring is a deadly gamble where barely any teams survive after 5 short years. However, Iga confidently reveals to the audience that he already possessed a secret advantage as a dark horse. This hidden advantage relies entirely on his deep understanding of Cross's immense and untapped first potential. Iga notes that no one else truly knows the real Cross as he prepares a fireball spell. Because Cross is a rare-born hero, Iga knew legendary adventurers would naturally form a powerful team. Iga internally credits his incredible ability to accurately recognize this unique talent to his secret ace skill. Revealing his hidden power, Iga activates a special gift eye directly bestowed upon him by a goddess. The mystical eye visually confirms without a doubt that Cross's destined occupation is undeniably that of a hero. This trained skill easily allows him to see people's future occupations, strongest points, and future magic. Iga celebrates that nobody suspects him while others dismissively mock his seemingly weird and completely useless poses. Knowing Cross's heroic destiny from the start, Iga never considered their ambitious journey to be a gamble. Fleeing from a terrifying horned beast, Iga bitterly admits that this career is definitely not enjoyable. He notes that before his destined heroic characteristics fully awaken, Cross is currently and completely totally useless. They relied heavily on part-time jobs while Iga handled early threats smoothly using his basic magic skills. Exactly a week later, older veteran adventurers sternly warned the duo to stop joking and beat it. The terrified veterans scream for them to run away, calling it utter nonsense to fight the beast. Completely ignoring the frantic warnings, Iga confidently tells Cross to step up and show everyone his power. The massive horned beast roars fiercely but suddenly looks confused as Cross begins to make his move. With absolute blinding speed, Cross bravely dashes forward and cleanly slices the massive beast down to the ground. The astonished crowd wonders how Cross gained immense strength in a week, while Iga silently credits his own presence. Cross happily celebrates their teammate victory, unaware that Iga used his second skill, a blessing cord, to double experience. Cross and Iga confidently believe that their incredible journey together is now becoming much bigger and greater than ever. 6 years of constant missions pass, building a phenomenal party, but Iga feels his team position becoming increasingly unclear. Iga reflects that the special gift eye from the goddess was undeniably useful when the team members were newbies. Similarly, his unique blessing cord ability proved highly beneficial by helping everyone level up their essential skills significantly faster. However, facing a massive dragon during their critical mission to defeat the Demon King renders those early skills trash. Watching his powerful allies, Iga sadly realizes he is just a normal person without those two previously helpful skills. Staring at the darkened silhouettes of his victorious friends, Iga fully accepts that quitting the party is absolutely unavoidable. Offering to pack precious individual tools for the team, Iga gets interrupted by members praising him and Tiana highly. Cross agrees silently, while Iga cheerfully winks and suggests bringing essential gadgets if he genuinely wants to continue adventuring. Leaning casually against the wooden tavern bar, a somewhat hesitant Cross softly calls out to his reliable friend Iga. Cross quietly informs his friend that they will board the highly anticipated Zahar Belt ship together the following night. Cross happily explains that the Zahar Belt headquarters is the ultimate glory city they always dreamt of reaching together. Iga reacts with sheer shock, loudly suggesting that they could simply hold the farewell party much earlier tomorrow noon. Cross enthusiastically babbles about buying drinks and inviting pretty girls, prompting Iga to sighingly call him a literal kid. A drunken Cross complains about packing luggage, while Iga strictly reminds him to have a difficult conversation with Tiana. Looking closely at his companion with an unusually serious expression, Cross gently calls out for Iga one more time. Surprising Cross immensely, Iga abruptly turns his head away towards the dark tavern entrance and mutters a quiet thanks. Pushing through the swinging wooden tavern doors, Iga formally bids his confused friend a good night before finally leaving. Outside the tavern, Iga smokes a cigarette while dreading the incredibly awkward and embarrassing farewell party awaiting him soon. Carrying a heavy bag over his shoulder, a thoroughly exhausted Iga quietly opens the wooden door to his room. Tiana, wearing glasses and a serious expression, suddenly appears right in front of him and firmly says good morning. Iga screams holy crap in absolute terror, utterly confused as to why Tiana is standing there so incredibly early. Tiana suspiciously questions Iga about where he is heading so early with packed luggage, instantly ruining his jogging excuse. Adjusting her glasses sternly, Tiana accurately deduces that Iga selfishly planned to leave quietly before the actual farewell happens. Iga begs her not to interfere with his departure, but Tiana mockingly replies that leaving silently lacks true manliness. Iga angrily yells at her firm refusal, arguing that holding a farewell party after forcing him out is incredibly weird. Shocked by the massive stack of paperwork, Iga learns these are properties and payments rewarding his long team dedication. Scratching his head in disbelief, Iga asks if Tiana seriously waited since early morning just to deliver these documents. Tiana angrily taps her glasses and insists the documents are extremely important, leaving Iga completely overwhelmed by her intensity. Giving an enthusiastic thumbs up, Iga smoothly suggests they sit down somewhere quiet and finally have a proper talk. Tiana blushes heavily and stammers nervously while clutching her arm, causing Iga to peek curiously and ask what happened. Gazing up at a softly glowing ceiling lamp, Iga calmly suggests relocating their important morning conversation to the lobby. The two companions finally relocate downstairs, settling quietly into opposite armchairs within the empty and softly lit-in lobby. Iga struggles to begin reading the documents until Tiana sharply demands to know what he and Cross intend doing. Brushing off her probing question with a fake smile, Iga coldly apologizes and claims he is not a member. Iga defensively insists his intentions no longer matter since they are separating, pushing Tiana to angrily clarify her meaning. Leaning back awkwardly into the couch, Iga nervously begs her to keep her furious voice down while everyone sleeps. Tiana clicks her tongue in sheer frustration while Iga sighs exhaustedly and finally begins signing the heavily piled documents. Sitting in the lobby, Tiana curiously asks Iga about his future plans after leaving their phenomenal party. Iga considers joining another adventuring party to continue the journey he has followed for so many years. Tiana bluntly shares her opinion that Iga is no longer suitable for the dangerous occupation of adventuring. While Iga reacts with surprise, Tiana admits that his current skills are actually absolutely phenomenal to her. Tiana recalls the many times the team improved and succeeded specifically because of Iga's constant help. Speaking as a member of the team, Tiana looks down and expresses her sincere, heartfelt gratitude. Iga is moved by Tiana's kindness, but she begins to explain a difficult and unavoidable truth. Tiana explains that Iga's specific set of skills has unfortunately reached their absolute maximum growth limit. The silhouettes of the party members stand together, highlighting the gap between their potential and Iga's. Iga questions how Tiana could possibly know about his limits without seeing him try to improve. Internally, Iga admits Tiana is right because he knows his skills have truly reached their peak. At 27 years old, Iga reflects that developing any new potential is considered a very rare feat. Iga considers the consequences if he were to attempt building another adventuring party from the start. He fears a fatal cycle of helping teams grow stronger only to eventually be considered a detriment. Iga laughs bitterly at his own dead end while Tiana watches him with a deeply pained expression. Tiana promises to handle his responsibilities and wishes him the life he always truly wished for. Sliding a final piece of paper across the table, Tiana asks Iga to accept one last thing. Iga is completely stunned to find his final payment includes a massive territory of 2,500 acres. Seagulls fly over the bustling marinable harbor as large wooden ships sit docked at the busy pier. A friend playfully sneaks up on Iga as he stressfully reads his document about becoming a lord. The friend laughs about Cross throwing a farewell party while Iga begs him to keep his location secret. Iga reflects on two other party members who would consider dealing with him more trouble than it is worth. The quiet vanguard Derry strictly follows Emma, who serves as an indispensable and expert healer for their adventuring party. Someone harshly remarks that the weak get cold while Iga slumps down with a painfully dejected expression. A party member angrily complains that the entire team had to hold themselves back just so Iga could keep up. The teammate cruelly accuses Iga of mooching off them because Cross and Tiana hesitated to cut him loose. Another female teammate named Emma cheerfully chimes in to call the entire harsh conversation seriously and utterly pointless. The tall vanguard abruptly interrupts the argument by declaring it is enough and unceremoniously lifting the struggling Emma. Emma furiously flutters her arms and aggressively demands to be put down while Derry silently ignores her angry protests. The friend excitedly interrupts the tense moment to announce that their waiting boat is finally ready to set off. The enthusiastic girl proudly declares they are heading to the adventure holy land of Zahobelt on a massive ship. Iga watches the massive ship depart while bitterly realizing each passing moment takes him further away from glorious Zahobelt. He silently stares across the sparkling water and melancholically accepts his growing distance from that truly irresistible adventuring mystery. Walking slowly along the quiet wooden deck of his own ship causes Iga to feel suddenly and terribly seasick. A friendly peddler cheerfully approaches the nauseous Iga and generously offers a supposedly magical wellness necklace for his neck. Feeling completely desperate for any quick relief from his terrible nausea prompts Iga to thankfully borrow the beaded necklace. The sneaky peddler suddenly throws open his large coat to dramatically reveal a massive display of various merchant goods. Iga panics wildly as the loud peddler aggressively uses his famous adventuring identity to rapidly sell the health necklaces. An excited crowd of eager customers quickly swarms the delighted merchant after hearing the legendary Fantastic Five party mentioned. Iga grumpily complains about the blatant name abuse while the merchant joyfully counts his massive stack of earned cash. Iga solemnly reflects on how the famous Fantastic Five nickname technically includes him alongside Cross, Tiana, Emma, and Derry. He internally clarifies that the incredibly talented combat wizard Mori is actually the true fifth member of their group. A massive cross tragically emphasizes Iga realizing he is definitely not considered a true member of the Fantastic Five. The highly skilled trader boldly laughs off the accusations by proudly claiming he never actually told a single lie. Iga slowly recognizes the simple peddler as Garcia, who joyfully insists he is very much obliged to their party. Garcia curiously asks about any brand new quests while a hesitant Iga nervously claims he is merely going sightseeing. The perceptive trader instantly narrows his sharp eyes and suspiciously questions why Iga would be going sightseeing completely alone. The energetic trader loudly calls out for Tiana while completely ignoring Iga, trying desperately to avoid the awkward topic. Iga awkwardly turns his head away and quietly informs the nosy merchant that Tiana is actually currently seeing Cross. Garcia loudly and dramatically assumes Iga got dumped while an annoyed Iga internally fumes at the incredibly insensitive merchant. Staring knowingly at the sky allows Garcia to cheerfully conclude that this solo trip must soothe a broken heart. The peddler tries to quickly escape a non-paying customer, but Iga aggressively grabs his coat to forcefully stop him. Iga firmly holds onto the struggling merchant and silently activates his secret goddess eye skill to analyze the man. The mystical eye firmly confirms that despite being a complete dimwit, his destined job as a trader is real. Iga internally reflects that the destined job someone is born with rarely lines up perfectly with their actual vocation. Realizing he needs talented subordinates to become a successful lord prompts Iga to maintain his tight grip on Garcia. Garcia completely misinterprets the intense stare and desperately tries to escape hearing any sad sob stories about love lives. Iga confidently smirks while Garcia suddenly freezes as his unique business sensor skill detects a highly profitable hidden motive. The excited trader aggressively rubs his hands together, eagerly offering to talk business with Iga. Pushing aside his food, Iga spends most of his boat trip consulting the knowledgeable trader. The curious peddler asks about Iga's final destination as they slowly approach the Sukahama port. Playing cards together, Garcia casually recalls how Iga's famous party defeated the great serpent Ghidorah. Garcia notes the hero party was granted the exact land where they killed the serpent. Winking playfully, the trader informs Iga he must spend the night resting at Sukahama port. Garcia kindly hands Iga referral cards for the Yellow Crane Tower's exclusive pine treatment service. Watching the approaching harbor, Iga happily decides the sneaky peddler is not a bad guy. Stretching his arms cheerfully, Iga admires the uniquely beautiful culture surrounding the Yellow Crane Tower. Iga lies completely passed out in a messy room surrounded by empty liquor bottles everywhere. A beautiful woman wearing a floral kimono gracefully slides the door open to wake him. Blurry flashbacks reveal Iga drunkenly partying with multiple beautiful hostesses during the previous wild night. Groaning in severe pain, Iga complains about his aching body while the woman offers help. Iga awkwardly glances away as the teasing woman scolds him for his inappropriate morning reaction. The teasing woman cheerfully reveals her actual job is a professional healing wizard to Iga. Iga asks for the bill, and the woman calmly requests a massive 50 million tel. Realizing the staggering cost equals roughly 5 million bont, Iga panics completely in utter shock. She explains Garcia's special referral meant receiving the absolute highest class service they currently offer. Glaring intensely, Iga finally realizes the sneaky trader completely manipulated him into this expensive trap. The calmly smiling hostess easily accepts a massive stack of bont bills from defeated Iga. The lovely hostesses wave goodbye while Iga bitterly curses losing half his total adventuring savings. Iga's wooden ship sails eastern waters, remaining 3 whole days away from his final destination. Spotting the familiar peddler on the boat deck, Iga glares as Garcia cheerfully greets him. Iga angrily confronts the trader about the deceptively wild and incredibly expensive experience today. Garcia suddenly bows deeply, apologizing profusely and claiming he was merely testing his adventuring friend. Looking completely confused, Iga quietly questions why the peddler would ever need to test him. Garcia explains he doubted Iga, assuming the famous hero party had simply dropped him entirely. The trader pragmatically admits associating with someone in a downward spiral is just terrible business. Garcia essentially wanted to see how Iga reacted to being slapped with a massive bill. Bowing his head closely, Garcia deeply apologizes for completely misjudging Iga's current financial and mental situation. Iga quietly scratches his cheek while thoughtfully processing the trader's surprisingly honest and pragmatic confession. Smiling gently at the peddler, Iga admits Garcia's sharp intuition was actually perfectly on the mark. Iga honestly explains he was fired, receiving the distant territory as his only severance pay. Processing the surprising information, Garcia realizes Iga is truly traveling to manage his new territory. Pointing confidently at the peddler, Iga suddenly declares he wants Garcia working directly for him. A shocked Garcia hesitates, noting Iga might not even want the unseen and distant territory. Iga calmly states he has absolutely nothing to do with the famous hero party anymore. Garcia nervously scratches his head as Iga casually offers him the absolute freedom to leave. Iga internally notes they remained completely silent for the remainder of their long boat trip. Iga silently accepts his inherent value completely plummeted after leaving the incredibly famous hero party. Iga finally arrives at the far eastern frontier after 3 long days spent traveling across the vast open sea. The young man gazes upon the desolate landscape of Tukumo, which appears to be a completely abandoned frontier. Scavenging crows and sinking wooden boats fill the shoreline of the port that has clearly fallen into absolute ruin. Stepping onto the cracked ground, Iga realizes the documents from Tiana indicate his new territory begins right here. Iga scratches his head in utter disbelief while observing the port, which is in a state of total shambles. The devastated adventurer wonders what the rest of his vast land looks like if the port is this pathetic. Lying face down on the dusty ground, Iga despairs over the terrible condition of his newly acquired frontier property. A loud cracking sound echoes through the air as the fragile wooden structure suddenly gives way beneath his weight. Iga remains on the broken floor and tiredly remarks that the port is in extremely rough shape for visitors. Garcia crouches down beside the fallen man and kindly asks if his new lord needs a helping hand upward. Iga looks up at his companion with a faint and weary smile while processing the reality of his situation. Garcia encourages him by saying an adventure becoming a lord will make for an incredibly interesting and unique story. Iga mistakenly calls the traitor the wrong name while trying to express his sincere gratitude for the earlier assistance. The traitor stares back with a very serious expression and firmly reminds the man that his name is Garcia. Garcia lectures Iga that getting a name wrong is the worst sin anyone can commit in the business world. The two companions take their first difficult steps into Tukumo while Iga jokingly considers abandoning the entire Lord project. Reviewing Tiana's document, Iga notes his new eastern frontier territory of Tukumo houses 7 villages and 2,500 villagers. Smoking quietly, Iga decides his desire to become the Lord remains contingent on seeing the land for himself. The companions trek through the dense forest, realizing they have been walking from the port for 2 hours straight. Glancing around the rustling woods, Iga complains loudly that they have not encountered a single person yet. A completely flustered Garcia suddenly screams in absolute terror while sprinting frantically toward his deeply confused companion. Massive buzzing monsters furiously chase the terrified traitor, prompting him to beg loudly for immediate emergency assistance. Stepping calmly forward, Iga observes the approaching threat while the panicking merchant shrieks uncontrollably behind his back. Iga quickly identifies the aggressive swarm as gud bees, noting their dangerous red eyes indicate an imminent group attack. Stretching his hand forward confidently, Iga boldly casts the Kurado fire spell to incinerate the incoming monstrous swarm. A massive and overwhelming wave of scorching flames instantly engulfs the helpless bees in a spectacular fiery explosion. An amazed Garcia praises the fantastic attack, though Iga secretly admits Kurado remains a simple beginner-level spell. Iga explains the Kira fire magic line, noting his personal firepower firmly peaks at the intermediate Kiradon level. The former adventurer admits his strict limitations, acknowledging he could never successfully learn any advanced expert-level spells. Iga playfully mocks the feeble traitor for being genuinely terrified of such weak and easily defeated forest monsters. Patting the confused merchant gently, Iga confidently promises he will not need to fear gud bees much longer. Iga secretly reflects that his blessed performance skill means Garcia will constantly gain double the usual combat experience. Despite lacking official employment, the highly sensitive training skills unknowingly continue to dramatically boost the nearby merchant. Smiling proudly to himself, Iga embraces the absolute certainty that he still remains a truly first-rate ability trainer. Dark silhouettes of his former teammates momentarily cloud his thoughts as he remembers where his exceptional skills ended. Staring across the rustling wilderness, Iga begrudgingly accepts that Tiana was absolutely right on the money regarding him. Breaking the heavy silence, an enthusiastic Garcia eagerly points forward and commands his distracted friend to look ahead. Nestled within the overgrown forest, they successfully locate a highly compact and incredibly run-down wooden residential structure. Garcia forcefully insists the structure is a fine house, while a skeptical Iga plainly labels it a shed. The wooden door slowly slides open to reveal a severely trembling and incredibly exhausted old woman standing silently. The overly cheerful trader loudly introduces them as harmless tourists, desperately trying to reassure the frightened local resident. Glaring suspiciously, the wary woman heavily questions why anyone would ever travel this deep into dangerous mountains merely sightseeing. After firmly explaining their true situation, the reluctant elderly woman finally agrees to guide them directly up the mountainside. Pushing through the dense brush, Iga politely asks the elderly guide if she truly lives out here completely alone. She heartbreakingly reveals that her entire family and fellow villagers were tragically devoured by the monstrous serpent Ghidorah. Hearing her sorrowful sniffing, a sympathetic Iga warmly offers to carry the sad woman to properly ease her burden. Shocking both young men, the elderly woman rapidly hops away with incredible speed while firmly declining any physical assistance. Struggling intensely to keep pace, Iga desperately activates his goddess eye to uncover the secret behind her tremendous stamina. The mystical skill shockingly reveals the weathered mountain woman actually possesses the incredibly glamorous latent job of star idol. Watching the old woman sprint ahead, a completely exhausted Iga silently curses the undeniably cruel nature of the world. Heavy raindrops suddenly plop against the leafy surroundings before rapidly escalating into a massive and overwhelming torrential downpour. Several grueling hours later, the drenched companions trudge miserably through the muddy forest while gasping heavily for fresh air. Leaning heavily against a wet rock, a soaked Iga realizes his rapidly failing stamina is becoming a serious problem. He bitterly mocks his own supposedly confident adventuring stamina, imagining Cross and the others ruthlessly laughing at his weakness. Carrying his heavy sack, Iga enviously imagines his former companions safely reaching the dazzling jewel city of Zahobelt already. A sudden and terrifying slip sends Iga tumbling backward off the steep cliffside while a panicked Garcia yells out. Iga slips and grabs a vine while tumbling down the cliff, letting out a pained and sudden grunt. Landing in the mud with a wet squelch, Iga gasps for air while recovering from his messy and painful fall. Covered in mud, Iga wonders why he is dragging himself through these mountains to fight weak and lowly monsters. He recalls his former dream of living a glorious life that shone brightly under the warm and radiant sun. Iga realizes he must eventually grow up and leave behind his desires to be a world-renowned expert adventurer. The small group reaches a high mountain peak where they finally overlook the vast and expansive landscape below them. From the high cliff, they see wide rivers and distant villages scattered across the sunny and peaceful green plains. Far below them, numerous villagers are busy working near puddles while children play happily in the open fields. The old guide explains that most people live in the south because the western region is crawling with monsters. Watching the crowds from afar, the travelers realize there must be hundreds of people living in the southern area. Iga corrects his initial estimate, realizing there are actually thousands of people inhabiting his new and vast territory. Curious about the activity below, Iga asks what all those people are doing near the fast-moving river's edge. The guide explains the villagers are building a sturdy embankment because the river can become quite tumultuous at times. Iga realizes that while the river provides agricultural advantages, it must be controlled for people to live nearby. He contemplates the shared struggles of the inhabitants who work together to manage the powerful and unpredictable local waters. Down at the river, several strong workers use shovels and heavy bags to reinforce the vital and protective embankment. Iga internally reflects that nature itself is not inherently beautiful until humans find a way to reconcile with it. He concludes that true beauty does not lie in the people or the land alone but in their connection. The adventurer believes beauty is found in how man contends with and profits from the surrounding and untamed nature. He observes that the citizens live in inseparable harmony with the land, breathing as one with their vast home. Looking at the territory as a whole, Iga perceives the entire region as a singular, living, and breathing entity. Standing on the cliff, Iga makes a sudden decision and prepares to share his final thoughts with his companions. Iga declares firmly to Garcia and the old woman that he will officially take over as the new lord. A shocked Garcia asks if Iga is really going to give up on his life as an active adventurer. With a determined smirk, Iga clarifies that he has absolutely no intention of quitting his path as an adventurer. He vows that his territory will someday be strong enough to take on dangerous archfiend-level monster threats. Garcia argues that these simple villagers only live here to avoid monsters and are not ready for dangerous quests. Iga reminds a skeptical Garcia that he can make it happen through his own unique and powerful training skills. He confidently asserts that his training skills are absolutely second to none as he looks toward a strong nation. Iga and Garcia are in the far eastern frontier, Tekumo Forest, panicking over a buzzing threat. Carrying the terrified trader on his back, Iga desperately fights off a dangerous gut-bee swarm. Clashing swords with a monster, Iga angrily complains that this constant fighting gives him a headache. Slashing powerfully through a massive bee, Iga successfully defeats the aggressive monster with a swift strike. Garcia suggests resting at a southern village since the next ship arrives the day after tomorrow. Iga internally realizes his former party members will have successfully reached Zahobelt long before that ship. Slashing another flying monster, Iga briefly wonders what his former teammates are currently doing right now. Meanwhile, on a luxurious ship deck, Emma complains loudly about being bored out of her skull. Emma dramatically complains to Tiana that a gorgeous girl genius like her should never wait for tea. Tiana calmly stirs her tea while completely ignoring Emma begging for her attention across the table. Emma aggressively leans forward, demanding to know why she is being ignored by her distracted teammate. Startled by the sudden yelling, Tiana quickly apologizes and admits she was lost in deep thoughts. An annoyed Emma accurately guesses that Tiana is still pointlessly fretting about their absent teammate Iga. Emma bluntly declares Iga was not pulling his weight and got appropriately fired for his weakness. Adjusting her glasses, Tiana strictly reminds Emma they need to focus on upcoming dangerous archfiend quests. Emma cheerfully agrees with the decision, admitting she has absolutely no problems leaving their dead weight. Peering sharply through her glasses, Tiana suspiciously asks Emma why she seems to care so much. Sighing heavily, Emma admits that picking on Tiana is failing to assuage her current dull monotony. Two strange men suddenly approach their table, confidently flirting with the supposedly knockout girls sitting alone. Smiling smugly to herself, Emma delightfully realizes the two strange men are actively trying to flirt. Emma joyfully celebrates being desired by men, bragging about her flawless figure and supposedly magnificent manners. Twirling gracefully, Emma enthusiastically accepts the invitation and cheerfully offers to join the men for tea. The men completely ignore Emma, directing all their flirtatious compliments toward a highly confused Tiana instead. A furious Emma leaps forward, frantically pointing at her own charming features while demanding proper attention. Ignoring her completely, the annoying man coldly pushes Emma away by stepping firmly on her head. Thrown backward by the harsh shove, Emma hits the wooden floor with a painful and loud thud. Glaring fiercely, an enraged Emma angrily demands to know who these arrogant men think they are. A massive armored man suddenly grabs the flirtatious stranger by the head, lifting him completely off ground. Still sitting on the floor, Emma casually notices the towering vanguard Derry has arrived to help. The giant man silently looks down and softly tells Emma that he thinks she is pretty. Leaning against the table, a heavily annoyed Emma dryly mutters that his compliment helps absolutely zero. A sharply dressed man approaches smoothly, casually asking if the strange guys need something from them. The two flirts suddenly panic in sheer terror, instantly recognizing the legendary hero Cross standing before them. Sweating nervously, the terrified men realize they accidentally hit on the remaining members of the Fabulous Five. Tiana pinches the bridge of her nose, coldly informing the trembling men they are quite busy. Glaring sharply through her glasses, Tiana threateningly gives the intruders exactly 3 seconds to remove themselves. The deeply terrified men immediately apologize and rapidly sprint away from the incredibly dangerous adventuring party. Cross smiles brightly at his powerful team, excitedly announcing that they are very nearly there now. Cross boldly tells his friends to brace themselves as the sacred land of Zahelbelt finally appears. He passionately declares this legendary city is just one more stop on their journey to the top. Staring forward with unwavering determination, Cross firmly tells an absent Aga to watch them closely. The grand scene seamlessly transitions to a sweeping view of the bustling and famous Zahelbelt harbor. Excited reporters eagerly point out the hero Cross, cheering loudly that the Fantastic Five have finally arrived. Screaming fans desperately cry out for Derry and Cross, absolutely thrilled their dear heroes are finally here. A massive flock of chattering fans violently swarms the party, desperately begging for interviews and attention. Emma casually hops out, sarcastically commenting on the extremely warm welcome while cameras rapidly snap photos. A sweating Derry quietly begs Emma for help, as she notes his lifelong extreme popularity with ladies. An eager reporter desperately demands to know how ecstatic Cross feels about finally arriving in legendary Zahelbelt. Striking a dramatic pose, Cross boldly declares they will always give absolutely everything to every single fight. Holding his pen high, the persistent reporter presses Cross for comments about officially taking dangerous archfiend quests. The nervous reporters completely freeze and audibly gulp as Cross intensely confirms he has one important comment. With absolute dramatic flair, Cross loudly proclaims that this moment is only the true beginning of their fight. Emma internally mocks Cross for his empty-headed and shallow words while the flashing press calls him absolutely incredible. A stern reporter abruptly stops the hero, firmly asking one more question regarding their Fantastic Five party name. The sharp reporter ruthlessly notes they are currently down a man, suspiciously questioning if dangerous inter-party trouble exists. The team members freeze awkwardly in silence, prompting Emma to slowly clarify the situation with extreme exactness. Emma internally jokes that nobody notices the fired Aga, revealing out loud they are actually down 2 members. Shocked murmurs instantly ripple through the completely bewildered crowd as reporters struggle to process this highly unexpected news. Tiana smoothly assures the crowd that their combat wizard Mori is simply away on a temporary solo expedition. The amazed reporters eagerly murmur about the insanely young genius Mori undertaking a highly impressive solo wilderness expedition. Emma praises Tiana's incredibly sly trick of using the highly famous Mori to easily distract the nosy media. However, Tiana internally admits that claiming there are absolutely no problems within the party is an outright lie. Tiana dreads having to properly explain Aga being let go once the oblivious Mori finally links back up. Emma stretches casually and completely dismisses the serious issue, deciding Cross and Tiana can break the difficult news. Staring softly into the distant sky, Tiana actually pauses and quietly reflects on their deeply complicated current situation. Tiana sincerely hopes Aga is getting along with his domain while Emma genuinely wonders what he is doing. Deep within the heavily forested mountains, someone excitedly spots a series of simple wooden structures making up a village. Aga notes the small village is perfect for resting, but Garcia suspiciously murmurs and rubs his chin intensely. Garcia nervously warns that rural folk hate strangers, but an oblivious Aga insists their innocent sightseeing causes no issues. A sudden and heavy sound abruptly startles the 2 travelers, causing them both to freeze in complete shock. The travelers violently spin around as aggressive, hostile voices fiercely demand to know where the hell they came from. Panicking uncontrollably, Garcia screams that they are totally trapped as heavily armed, blindfolded men completely surround the terrified duo. Surrounded by intimidating, weapon-wielding villagers, Aga and Garcia completely freeze in sheer terror and absolute panic. A burly villager suddenly breaks the tension with a bright grin while enthusiastically asking where they originate. The incredibly friendly villagers quickly swarm the confused travelers while offering massive amounts of food and shelter. A loud and commanding voice abruptly orders the excited crowd to simmer down and stop crowding the guests. The villagers immediately shuffle aside to make way for the stern and muscular village chief to approach them. Aga breathes a heavy sigh of relief as the imposing village chief finally arrives to restore proper order. The proud chief firmly declares that the 2 visiting guests will obviously be staying at his personal house. The disappointed villagers loudly boo the chief while he aggressively yells for them to step off right now. Later that evening, the 2 travelers enjoy a massive feast inside the surprisingly swanky house of the chief. The chief laughs heartily while apologizing sincerely for his overly enthusiastic people troubling the 2 exhausted travelers today. Iga notes the chief's exceptionally clean house will make sleeping on the floor completely comfortable without any problems. Garcia enviously remarks on the chief's gorgeous wife as they happily enjoy the generously provided food and drinks. Iga politely turns to the village chief and curiously asks what specific industry everyone in this settlement performs. Flexing his massive muscles proudly, the chief loudly declares that his strong people are all hardworking rural woodcutters. Seeing the incredibly burly men flex their muscles makes Iga realize exactly why everyone here is so massive. Iga internally summarizes that this forestry village named Kimura houses a population of roughly 150 people. He realizes that being a dedicated woodcutter requires moving massive lumber across the entire Takumo region every day. The extensive labor involves cutting trees, sawing wood, estimating regional demand, and transporting the highly manufactured goods everywhere. Leaning forward with a sly glint, a curious Garcia asks the chief if forestry is a profitable business. The grinning chief happily confirms the business is incredibly profitable, especially after the terrifying Ghidorah monster incident passed. The chief recalls how the massive serpent monster severely ravaged the entire Takumo region before being finally defeated. Ironically, that horrific monster damage successfully created a massive and highly lucrative demand for rebuilding materials and lumber. The incredibly tough chief laughs heartily while proudly declaring his resilient people always get back up after falling. Iga secretly uses his unique goddess eye skill on the villagers, identifying the chief's destined job as woodcutter. The mystical goddess eye skill easily reveals the specific ideal job someone is most naturally suited to perform. The powerful skill also displays the exact magic and unique abilities they will naturally learn as they grow. However, the limited eye strictly shows ideal potential rather than the actual occupation someone is currently working in. Seeing someone's current occupation actually requires a much higher status check skill level than Iga currently possesses, unfortunately. Iga realizes he was actively seeking latent adventurer jobs rather than livelihood occupations when the villagers surrounded them. Out of 10 young villagers secretly checked, Iga successfully found exactly 2 individuals possessing highly valuable adventurer jobs. He happily spotted 1 mage and 1 martial artist, though neither possessed an amazing amount of natural talent. Lying awake under the moonlight, Garcia confidently tells Iga he possesses the absolutely perfect abilities to be Lord. A highly confused Iga turns slightly toward his confident friend and admits he does not follow the logic. Garcia excitedly suggests Iga could effortlessly force every subject into their ideal job to make the territory flourish. Iga closes his eyes and strictly tells his companion that his terrible idea represents a very shallow view. The next peaceful morning arrives with tiny birds chirping happily over the quiet and beautiful mountainous village landscape. Standing outside his house, the chief asks Iga to confirm if they are actually heading toward Nakamura next. Iga bows respectfully and confirms they want to safely visit Takumo's absolute biggest village of 1,200 people. The generous chief graciously offers to have a local river crew safely guide the 2 grateful travelers forward. Calling out loudly to someone named Chio, the village chief proudly introduces the promised local river guide crew. The village chief orders Chio to guide their guests toward Nakamura while the young woman accepts the task. Iga recognizes Chio as the girl possessing the latent martial artist job whom he observed just yesterday afternoon. The travelers warmly greet Chio as she leads them along the forest path toward their next major destination. Chio takes command of the labor crew and orders the boys to begin moving the heavy lumber carts. The burly woodcutters refuse Iga's offer to help because they take great pride in their own immense strength. Iga stares in absolute awe at the massive muscles of the woodcutters who easily put most adventurers to shame. The entire group stops abruptly when Chio signals a halt to assess the path through the dense forest ahead. Chio identifies a dangerous landslide blocking their route and skillfully directs the crew to move safely around it. She coordinates multiple groups to detour or stand by to ensure the heavy lumber stays moving without any accidents. Iga notes that Chio moves with the grace of an expert while showing incredible flexibility in her leadership role. When a wheel malfunctions, Chio immediately handles the repairs herself and keeps the delivery schedule perfectly on track. Encouraging her crew to push together as one, Chio helps free a heavy cart caught in the deep mud. Iga and Garcia join the effort to repay the chief's kindness by helping move the massive piles of wood. Iga remarks that Chio holds a very significant village responsibility for someone who appears to be quite young. Chio laughs and explains that she has been assisting with moving lumber since she was just a small child. After being called the lumber-moving chief, Chio playfully whaps Iga on the back with her strong hand. The young woman produces a lunch that the village chief's wife specifically packed for the 2 traveling guests. Garcia reacts with intense excitement at the prospect of food while the group prepares for a much-needed rest. Chio presents delicious homegrown rice balls to the travelers as they settle down for lunch by the river. The companions enjoy the simple meal of rice and fresh water while listening to the peaceful sounds of nature. Iga sits quietly and reflects on the local lifestyle while finishing the final bites of his gifted lunch. Leaning against the massive logs, the tired group enjoys the refreshing breeze during their brief break from labor. Giggling happily at Iga's compliment, Chio agrees that the forest she grew up in is a truly beautiful place. The group finally reaches Nakamura, which is known as the absolute largest village within the entire Takumo territory. Iga thanks Chio for her extra guidance while the woodcutters continue their task of managing the heavy lumber. Looking around the quiet landscape, Garcia whispers to Iga that this village feels much more dreary than Kimura. Chio explains that Nakamura is fundamentally different from their home village after Iga notices the lack of workers. Spotting local children playing nearby, Garcia enthusiastically decides to introduce himself and the group to the wary villagers. The merchant runs toward the kids while offering chocolate and fun toys to win over the skeptical local population. Chio attempts to stop Garcia while warning that strangers should never just run up on the Nakamura children. Terrified children flee into the arms of their mothers who protectively shield them from the approaching strange man. Garcia is devastated by the rejection while Iga realizes his friend is actually quite fond of young children. Chio notes that the villagers exhibit extreme stranger anxiety and remain much more withdrawn than the people in Kimura. Turning to Garcia, Iga questions if simply assigning people to ideal jobs is actually as easy as it sounds. Iga asks Chio if it would be easy to transplant a Nakamura villager to work effectively in Kimura. Chio firmly believes it would not work because the boys back home possess a completely different social dynamic. Iga realizes the flaw in the merchant's simplistic theory and prepares to share his insight on effective leadership. He argues that simply splitting people up and portioning them out into specific jobs would not actually function. Iga compares the situation to forming a legendary party which requires more than just individuals with high stats. He concludes that implementing such a mandate is incredibly difficult because human connections are not easily broken or assigned. Iga explains that parties are living entities contingent on members wanting to work together. Iga notes that organizing thousands of people across a massive territory scale is incredibly complicated. Splitting everyone into single units strictly destroys the crucial balance required for collective growth. Garcia finally understands and verbally admits that managing this massive territory was never going to be easy. A confused Chio nervously asks if Iga finds their quiet rural home completely unsatisfactory. Iga quickly reassures her while Chio sadly guesses the village offers absolutely nothing for city folks. Iga pauses and stares back at the highly surprised young woman before delivering his unexpected answer. Iga genuinely declares that Takumo is absolutely great and he looks forward to living there. Iga formally asks to count on Chio for building lumber while the girl excitedly agrees. The friendly companions make a solid promise and finally part ways to begin their grand capital journey. Later that freezing night, Iga groans miserably while shivering tightly beneath his completely inadequate blanket. The shivering companions loudly complain about completely hating outdoor camping while desperately missing comfortable futons. Iga grumpily tells Garcia to quiet down while intensely resolving to quickly build a comfortable home. Arriving at the port town of Sukahama, Iga realizes he must get his deed formally signed over. Eating dango on a bench, a highly confused Iga asks if he really needs to tag along. Garcia enthusiastically explains that Sukahama is absolutely perfect for an ambitious trader to meet his local clients. The cheerful merchant playfully asks if his companion can simply travel to the grand capital entirely alone. Realizing the capital locomotive leaves in 2 hours, Iga crumples his paper and decides to smoke quietly. Strolling through the peaceful park, Iga approaches a small wooden stall and easily purchases some fresh cigarettes. Puffing on his cigarette, Iga stares frustratedly at a local newspaper completely unreadable due to Eastern script. Wandering aimlessly through bustling streets, Iga politely asks a local shopkeeper where to find global script newspapers. Collapsing onto a street bench in utter defeat, Iga loudly complains that nobody sells what he needs. Staring thoughtfully upward, Iga suddenly remembers one specific and reliable location that provides readable newspapers for adventurers. Iga soon arrives at a massive and grand building nestled within a bustling courtyard filled with travelers. Standing before the Far Eastern Adventurer Guild, Iga notes this branch office expertly supports all local questers. Recalling his past Ghidorah mission, Iga happily confirms. The familiar guild definitely possesses reading material he understands. Despite his confidence, Iga hesitates nervously with his trembling hand hovering right above the shiny door handle. Iga internally panics because he has absolutely no clue if his recent embarrassing party termination is public. He dreads the truly terrifying possibility of an entire adventurer crowd ruthlessly mocking his failure behind him. Pushing the heavy door open, Iga is instantly and cheerfully welcomed by an enthusiastic local guild receptionist. Desperately hiding his face behind dark sunglasses, Iga awkwardly shuffles inside while the bright receptionist smiles warmly. Iga closely observes the relatively small guild offering standard equipment rentals and quest boards for local heroes. Sighing in profound relief, Iga happily notices absolutely none of the high-ranked elite parties he formerly knew. Sitting comfortably on a quiet wooden bench, Iga confidently snaps open a newspaper to check world events. The front page immediately displays massive breaking news about the legendary hero party finally reaching glorious Zahobelt. Iga forces a completely hollow laugh while his heart suddenly thumps wildly at seeing his former friends. Deciding to leave boring market trends to Garcia, Iga focuses entirely on scanning articles about high-profile parties. Desiring one final piece of crucial information, Iga carefully leans down to search the wooden magazine rack. Iga retrieves King Venture, an incredibly popular magazine that meticulously ranks and analyzes global adventuring parties bi-monthly. The detailed magazine reveals his former Fantastic Five party successfully cracked the top 10 at rank 9. Iga notes with absolute amazement that Cross incredibly leaped to number 13 on worldwide individual strength rankings. Continuing his incredibly proud reading, Iga easily spots the young genius Mori impressively ranked at 57 overall. Flipping the glossy pages lazily, Iga observes that the powerful spells word Glycophantony obviously remains ranked first. Someone loudly calls out his full name, prompting a terrified Iga to freeze as Roy quickly approaches. Roy excitedly brags about their past friendship while a panicking Iga aggressively demands he stop yelling loudly. Iga internally notes this highly annoying guy was a former Magic University classmate with a different nickname. A tight facial close-up shows Roy sneering maliciously, instantly revealing his true nature as a royal pain. The entire guild room begins aggressively whispering malicious rumors about Iga being fired for being dead weight. Roy completely mocks his former classmate for getting sacked, laughing hysterically while Iga clenches his teeth silently. Leaning incredibly close, Roy cruelly claims Iga underperformed and that the famous party was leaving him behind. While the cruel crowd chuckles mercilessly, Iga clenches his fist in pure rage and internally demands silence. Shaking violently in pure agonizing shame, Iga tragically realizes he has absolutely no idea how to respond. Roy smugly watches Iga suddenly stand up, mockingly asking if the completely defeated adventurer is heading home. An arrogant voice cruelly declares that the prestigious guild is certainly not for former adventurers like Iga. Iga glares fiercely as the arrogant man maliciously labels him a completely useless and discarded ex-adventurer. Iga turns in absolute shock when a loud female voice aggressively demands an excuse from the bully. A highly imposing female warrior wearing revealing armor confidently marches right past the completely stunned young men. The mysterious armored woman smiles brightly and cheerfully announces that she definitely recognizes the surprised Iga. Pointing directly at him, the energetic woman confidently identifies the bewildered young man as Iga Janice. Iga instantly recognizes her as the legendary spellsword who effortlessly bends raw lightning to her absolute will. He internally recalls that this beautiful warrior has supposedly achieved truly unparalleled levels of glorious sword mastery. He realizes in complete awe that she is Glycophantony, the absolute strongest woman in the world. The bullies stutter in pure terror, wondering why the world's greatest adventurer is visiting this remote location. Leaning incredibly close to Iga, Glyco curiously asks what brings a man like him so far east. Iga awkwardly laughs off the question while noting that no major quests exist here for her caliber. Glyco smiles mysteriously and vaguely explains that she actually traveled here to handle some highly specific business. Flexing her incredibly impressive physique, Glyco leans forward playfully to share another highly personal and unexpected observation. Blushing slightly, Iga completely changes the subject by awkwardly commenting on her continued fondness for bikini armor. He nervously suggests the armor lacks protection, causing Glyco to chuckle loudly at his highly embarrassed concern. Striking another heroic pose, Glyco proudly declares the revealing armor perfectly displays her gorgeously sculpted combat muscles. Iga completely sweat drops at her weird logic, admitting that such bizarre reasoning perfectly matches her eccentric personality. Meanwhile, the terrified bully completely panics after realizing he accidentally insulted a friend of the strongest adventurer. Glyco dramatically points at a heavily sweating Iga, mentioning she heard a very interesting rumor about him. The malicious bully eagerly anticipates Iga being mocked, as Glyco bluntly asks if he quit his party. The incredibly cruel classmate internally cheers, truly believing the legendary warrior is about to ruthlessly humiliate Iga. Instead of mocking him, Glyco shockingly extends her hand and cheerfully invites the unemployed Iga to join her. The entire guild hall completely freezes in absolute silence while Iga and the bullies simply scream in shock. The furious bully desperately questions why the famously solitary lone wolf would ever recruit a worthless failure. Glyco smoothly ignores the screaming man, calmly explaining that Iga is the only adventurer she truly respects. Looking deeply into his entirely shocked eyes, the powerful warrior firmly insists that Iga severely underestimates his abilities. She highly praises his incredibly rare ability to master every single magical field up to the intermediate level. Eiga remains completely stunned as Glico accurately deduces that his vast and incredible magical potential remains mostly untapped. The powerful woman softly repeats her highly genuine and surprisingly heartfelt request to travel alongside the young mage. Staring forward with absolute fiery conviction, the legendary warrior confidently declares that her incredible recruitment offer is serious. Eiga internally doubts his own worth, bitterly assuming he would ultimately just become dead weight to her eventually. Despite his crippling inner insecurities, he briefly smiles while imagining how incredibly fun that wild adventure might be. Eiga politely declines her legendary offer, proudly revealing his new dream of fully nurturing his own sprawling territory. The surrounding crowd completely loses their minds, entirely unable to believe Eiga rejected the world's strongest famous adventurer. Glico gracefully accepts his firm rejection without any anger, promising she will never forcefully twist his stubborn arm. Quickly changing the heavy subject, Glico delightfully grabs a nearby magazine to immediately check her latest popularity ranking. Eiga casually teases the powerful woman for still caring deeply about retaining her highly prestigious #1 rank. Winking playfully at her former crush, the energetic warrior laughingly admits she only visited the guild for magazines. Watching the legendary hero boldly walk away, an incredibly amazed Eiga silently admits she is truly something else. The scene seamlessly transitions to the bustling Sukahama station where the massive and highly anticipated magic railroad awaits. Waiting eagerly near the massive train tracks, Eiga excitedly anticipates implementing his fantastic new training plans back home. Eiga bravely prepares to conquer the grand capital, fully determined to quickly finalize his official lord title paperwork. The steam locomotive arrives at the glittering imperial capital during a brightly lit and bustling night. Exiting the station into the pitch-black night, Eiga smokes while considering his next destination. Standing beneath a glowing street lamp, Eiga checks his location within the capital and wonders where to go. Consulting Tiana's instructions, Eiga decides to visit the government office first to handle his territory paperwork. Eiga speaks up and politely says "excuse me" to a woman walking ahead of him. Eiga asks a tall woman wearing a suit to please step aside while she walks away. The young man reacts with a shocked expression as the professional woman stares right through him. Watching her walk away, Eiga notes that finding a suited woman is quite rare in this country. Arriving at the capital government office, Eiga approaches the territory division counter to handle his official business. The receptionist asks Eiga to wait a moment while she contacts her supervisor regarding the deed transfer. Waiting patiently, Eiga skeptically wonders if a supervisor is truly necessary just for signing over territory rights. Section Councilor Shimada finally arrives and sincerely apologizes for the wait before introducing himself to Eiga. Shimada explains he cannot assist personally and asks Eiga to wait for yet another higher supervisor. Project Manager Okita introduces himself but immediately explains that he also needs to call his own supervisor. Section Manager Yamanami appears next, only to inform Eiga that he must contact his superior as well. Assistant Vice Minister Hijikata arrives but informs the traveler that his own supervisor is still required. Eiga feels like he is moving up in the world after being passed to increasingly important officials. Director Kondo finally appears and begs pardon from Sir Eiga for the incredibly long wait. Kondo explains the Emperor is currently indisposed, meaning Eiga must restart the entire procedure tomorrow morning. Eiga complains about the long wait, but the director apologizes and insists they cannot finish today. A mysterious man suddenly interrupts the conversation and asks Director Kondo what he is currently doing. Director Kondo greets the newcomer as the cabinet minister, expressing great pleasure at their sudden encounter. Realizing he is meeting the country's second most powerful man, Eiga reacts with absolute and total shock. The minister excitedly identifies Eiga as the hero who successfully slayed the great serpent Ghidorah recently. Eiga modestly denies his combat utility, but the powerful minister laughs and tells him not to be modest. The minister promises that everything will be handled right away if Eiga returns early tomorrow morning. Offering royal hospitality, the minister invites the new lord to stay overnight at the palace for entertainment. A horse-drawn carriage carries Eiga through the massive gates of the Far Eastern Country Imperial Palace. Eiga marvels at the tall architecture while palace guards politely take his weapon for safekeeping. A magnificent feast featuring a massive whole fish is presented for Sir Aiga to enjoy without hesitation. Impressed by the minister's character, Aiga enjoys the good food, drinks, and great conversation throughout the night. The minister explains the loose federation of lords who all answer directly to the powerful emperor. Aiga learns that the emperor appoints lords but does not impose taxes or special duties on them. Surprised by the autonomy, Aiga notes that the lords are essentially free to manage their own land. The minister clarifies that the only obligation is attending yearly Congress meetings unless a sufficient reason exists. Aiga reflects that this system offers much more freedom for his territory than he was initially expecting. Aiga pauses and prepares to explain his unique and fascinating thoughts regarding the future of his territory. The minister finds Aiga's idea to take on quests with his entire territory absolutely and completely fascinating. Assuring the young lord, the minister confirms the plan is not a problem while Aiga feels relieved. The minister warns that any planned insurrection will result in immediate and total suppression by the government. Aiga frantically waves his hands and nervously insists that rebelling against the government is absolutely not his intention. A tense Aiga internally admits his extreme inexperience in properly communicating with the citizens he technically lords over. The intimidating village chief strongly advises the highly anxious young lord to effectively utilize the public bulletin boards. Startled by the unexpected suggestion, an incredibly confused Aiga asks the chief to clarify using public bulletin boards. The chief proudly explains that regional priests successfully teach at least half the local population to properly read. An embarrassed Aiga nervously confesses he completely lacks the ability to read or write the complex Eastern script. The generous minister kindly offers to send one of his capable secretaries back to Takumo alongside Aiga. The official territory documents smoothly change hands the next day without any further issues or unexpected political complications. Aiga kneels respectfully as the emperor officially grants him a ceremonial bronze sword acknowledging his new lord status. Walking outside the palace, a highly relieved Aiga admits his intense nervousness while the minister praises his posture. Smiling warmly beneath his mustache, the minister gently asks Aiga to visit his personal estate before eventually departing. Aiga briefly stops and glances back over his shoulder with a highly surprised and slightly confused facial expression. Arriving at the grand estate, an amazed Aiga openly marvels at the incredibly prominent Western architectural design elements. Aiga nervously admits the fancy Western style feels uncomfortable while the minister assumes it reminds him of home. Reaching out to turn a fancy handle, an incredibly curious Aiga respectfully questions why the minister invited him. A stern woman suddenly pushes forcefully past a highly startled Aiga while coldly asking him to step aside. Aiga completely panics and stumbles backward as the minister cheerfully welcomes the unexpected woman to their private meeting. The minister smoothly introduces the imposing Miss Igarashi as one of his highly capable and brilliant personal secretaries. Bowing with absolute perfect posture, the serious Igarashi respectfully introduces herself and politely welcomes the stunned young lord. Realizing her true identity, an amazed Aiga points at the young secretary the minister highly praised last night. The minister cheerfully laughs while a skeptical Aiga nervously questions if the highly capable woman should join him. Believing Aiga possesses incredible training skills, the minister completely trusts him to expertly polish his most promising secretary. Watching the minister laugh heartily, Aiga internally notes the old man's incredible shrewdness and terrifyingly immense political power. A shocked Aiga learns that the highly professional Miss Igarashi actually originally hails from his own Takumo territory. The minister firmly orders Igarashi to accumulate experience while the massive steam locomotive successfully departs the busy station. Sitting comfortably near a window, an excited Aiga cheerfully admits he never previously experienced riding in first class. A suddenly terrified Aiga screams aloud as the completely silent Igarashi strictly confirms his luxurious accommodations are natural. Sweating profusely, an incredibly nervous Aiga internally complains about his absolute inability to read his highly stoic companion. Glancing sideways at the incredibly silent secretary, an awkward Aiga nervously struggles to properly initiate a casual conversation. Aiga cheerfully points forward and curiously asks the stoic Miss Igarashi if she truly originated from Takumo territory. Still maintaining her deadpan expression, Igarashi coldly explains she traveled to the grand capital entirely for university studies. An enthusiastic Aiga happily asks her current age while the stoic secretary bluntly reveals she is exactly 24. Shaking violently from the immense awkwardness, a completely terrified Iga internally screams that interviewing her feels extremely suffocating. Observing her sharp facial features, a highly intimidated Iga silently admits her completely deadpan expression deeply scares him. A deeply anxious Iga assumes the serious secretary absolutely hates the terrible idea of constantly following him around. Iga sympathetically notes she left a successful capital career to follow a completely random stranger toward her home. Desperate for deeper understanding, a determined Iga secretly activates his unique goddess eye training skill to analyze her. Staring intensely at the completely inscrutable woman, Iga confidently believes his powerful mystical skill will finally reveal her secrets. The magical system shockingly displays the destined job of wife directly above the deeply confused secretary's beautiful head. Leaning incredibly close, Igarashi curiously questions the flustered lord while Iga awkwardly laughs about surprisingly unexpected hidden talents. Gazing determinedly at the moonlit locomotive, Iga excitedly prepares to level up his new nation alongside strange bedfellows. Traveling across the sea on a boat, Garcia suspiciously asks Iga about the mysterious and silent new secretary. Iga explains to his skeptical companion that the stoic woman is actually the newest addition to their group. Garcia admits he understands the situation but remains visibly confused by Igarashi's intense and completely unreadable deadpan expression. When Garcia attempts a friendly handshake, he learns that Far Eastern customs do not involve such physical contact. The three companions share a simple meal on the boat while enduring a deeply awkward and heavy silence. Garcia laughs boisterously as he easily defeats the lord at cards while Iga groans over his terrible luck. Trying to break the ice, Garcia asks Igarashi if she agrees that their companion needs better card skills. Igarashi responds only with a piercing and wordless stare that makes the energetic merchant feel incredibly uneasy inside. Feeling the pressure of her gaze, a sweating Garcia nervously asks the secretary what she is thinking about. Leaning in close, Garcia whispers to Iga that he is going to be completely frank about the situation. Garcia desperately confesses to his friend that he simply cannot handle stoic and intimidating women like Miss Igarashi. Igarashi approaches suddenly, prompting a terrified Garcia to shriek and frantically clarify that he meant no actual offense. After a long journey across the ocean, the small group finally returns to the familiar shores of Tukumo. The morning sun rises over the quiet Tukumo port as the travelers prepare to begin their local administrative work. Recalling his past clumsy fall, Iga resolves to quickly shape up the port and improve the entire territory. Iga considers camping outdoors again but decides it is inappropriate now that a lady has joined their party. Since Igarashi is a local native, Iga suggests that they could possibly stay at her parents' home tonight. Igarashi reacts with visible gloom and apologizes while indicating that staying with her family is not an option. Observing her sudden drop in mood, Iga realizes he should not intrude upon the secretary's complicated private life. Iga quickly reassures her that she is under no obligation to take them to her family's private residence. With a bright smile, Iga claims that he and Garcia are already quite used to sleeping under stars. Igarashi firmly declares that a lord camping within his own domain is an absolutely unacceptable and improper act. She lectures Iga about the dignity of a ruler while insisting that they must find proper indoor lodgings. After a heavy sigh, the secretary states she will simply have to bear her resentment during this journey. Igarashi suggests they seek shelter at a nearby shrine which provides the only adequate accommodations for a lord. As they set off, a bewildered Iga wonders what the stoic secretary meant by her comment regarding resentment. The companions trudge up a long flight of stone steps while Garcia huffs and puffs from the exertion. Garcia compares the difficult climb to their previous guide while desperately begging for some immediate relief or help. After a grueling hike, the three travelers finally arrive at the entrance of the quiet and secluded shrine. An elderly priest approaches and curiously asks for their identities before Igarashi greets him warmly as her uncle. The priest is completely shocked to recognize the beautiful woman as his niece Etsuko, whom he calls Etsu. Praising her beauty, the uncle joyfully welcomes the new lord and invites everyone to enter the shrine grounds. Yoshioka Juzu introduces himself as the shrine priest and explains that he lives there with his young son. While sitting inside the shrine, Iga notices that Igarashi is acting strangely and appearing to be quite nervous. Juzu mentions his son will return soon, but Igarashi's anxiety spikes at the mention of the young man. Igarashi explicitly asks her uncle not to summon Shohei, showing a clear desire to avoid a specific confrontation. The son Shohei arrives rudely, prompting Juzo to scold him while introducing Iga as the territory's new lord. Iga introduces himself as Lord Eiga, but the skeptical Shohei struggles to believe the young man's official title. Shohei mockingly tells Igarashi not to feel bad about finally being demoted from her prestigious position in capital. Igarashi furiously clarifies that she chose to follow Lord Eiga of her own volition and was never demoted. Iga tells a ragged Garcia he should at least change into something more presentable right away. A highly surprised Iga asks if Shohei recently worked on the river embankment by the local village. The proud uncle excitedly explains that his highly capable son is currently leading the massive construction effort. Iga heavily praises his effective leadership while an incredibly embarrassed Shohei claims it is absolutely nothing special. Fidgeting nervously, Shohei awkwardly stammers that construction work was temporarily suspended to plow the nearby rice paddies. Igarashi fiercely glares at the highly efficient boy while suddenly letting out an incredibly frustrated quiet growl. Iga watches nervously as Igarashi seriously warns him that the young boy famously throws crayfish at others. She dramatically reveals Shohei accidentally beheaded a stone statue while the frantic boy angrily protests her story. Igarashi glares fiercely as the completely embarrassed boy aggressively yells that he was merely 3 years old. Shohei angrily grumbles that Itsuko has been intensely glaring and continuously complaining ever since she finally returned. The incredibly furious secretary aggressively grabs the young boy by his shirt collar while fiercely denying everything. The angry duo intensely bumps their foreheads together while viciously arguing exactly like incredibly petty childish siblings. Watching them fight allows Iga to immediately deduce they are simply acting exactly like typical normal siblings. Iga realizes she was acting incredibly weird strictly because she desperately wanted to avoid her annoying brother. The previously emotionless secretary shockingly reveals a highly expressive and incredibly fierce facial reaction during their fight. Staring closely at the fighting siblings makes Iga firmly conclude he absolutely loves this surprisingly emotional side. Shifting his serious attention immediately back toward Shohei prompts Iga to quickly ask the boy something important. Iga smiles warmly and formally invites the deeply confused young boy to comfortably sit down right now. After finishing his meal, Iga excitedly declares that building a truly strong territory definitely requires capable leadership. Iga bravely proposes forming an official government structure led directly by himself alongside 3 highly important secretaries. Pointing confidently ahead, Iga officially names Igarashi as his primary head secretary handling all incredibly important duties. The blushing secretary nervously accepts her prestigious new official position while everyone watches the completely surprising declaration. Garcia proudly steps forward holding massive cash stacks while successfully securing his own incredibly powerful financial position. An enthusiastic Iga dramatically announces that Shohei will permanently serve as the highly essential Secretary of Development. Iga sincerely believes the young boy possesses incredible talent after effectively leading the massive village construction efforts. Shohei immediately questions the ridiculous idea of a completely inexperienced kid becoming a highly powerful government official. A grinning Iga easily dismisses all logical protests while loudly proclaiming that simple physical ages never matter. Iga gently clasps the shocked boy's hands and passionately pleads for his absolute essential help right now. Etsuko softly encourages her deeply hesitant brother to bravely accept the massive and highly unexpected government opportunity. Surprised by her sudden support, Shohei closely listens as Etsuko officially calls Lord Eiga highly capable today. She firmly advises Shohei that working closely alongside Eiga promises him an incredibly fruitful and bright future. Blushing intensely, Shohei nervously admits his strict sister never previously complimented absolutely anyone with such high praise. Gathering his deep courage, the blushing boy formally accepts the massive new job while happily scratching his cheek. Garcia excitedly praises their grand political plan while proudly offering his absolute loyalty toward Lord Eiga today. Iga gratefully thanks everyone while successfully confirming Shohei officially agrees with continuously prioritizing all current local industries. Pointing confidently ahead, Iga specifically orders Garcia to thoroughly examine the entire local economy early tomorrow morning. Eiga firmly asks the Yoshioka family to continuously help him easily communicate with all the local villagers. Eiga politely instructs a determined Igarashi to quickly draw up several essential public bulletin boards for him. Smiling warmly into the starry night, Aga happily admits that managing everything is surprisingly incredibly fun actually. Staring softly upward, Aga slowly wonders exactly where he previously felt this incredibly warm familiar feeling before. He happily realizes this nostalgic feeling perfectly matches his early wonderful adventuring days alongside Cross and everyone. Activating his unique magical eye shockingly reveals that his new companions actually possess incredibly powerful destined occupations. 3 years ago, a woman desperately searches for Yuri while reassuring him that everything is okay now. She frantically begs Yuri to answer her while wandering alone through the empty and dark surroundings. The desperate woman screams Yuri's name into the heavy void as a dramatic sound echoes loudly. In present-day Tsukuhama, a working man admits he cannot recall much about events from 3 years ago. The woman clarifies she seeks her brother missing for 3 years, but the men deny seeing him. The workers suddenly recognize the searching woman as the famous #1 adventurer named Glico Fantini. Standing confidently before the astonished workers, Glico proudly confirms her identity as the legendary top adventurer. A massive crowd of ecstatic fans quickly swarms the legendary warrior while screaming in pure awe. Despite asking the eager fans for autographs about her brother, Glico, exhausted, admits finding absolutely nothing yet. Pausing thoughtfully, the legendary adventurer recalls a specific memory about running into someone very interesting recently. She warmly remembers Aga Janie's brightly smiling while boldly declaring he has another goal to pursue. Glico ironically notes that inconsequential crowds flock to her while the one person she wanted rejected her. Slapping her own cheeks to refocus, she stops complaining and decides Yuri is surely already waiting somewhere. Patting her hips, Glico resolves to complete a few quests to fiercely protect her top adventurer rank. Glico smiles confidently by the sea, trusting her missing brother will easily find the #1 adventurer. The wind rushes through the trees as the scene shifts toward another continent's great woodland region. Glico arrives at the designated dense forest spot where the guild officially assigned her monster hunting mission. A flashback reveals the guild requesting Glico to handle a massive troll horde despite her immense talents. The massive giant trolls easily stand thrice the size of normal monsters and overwhelm any ordinary adventurer. Hearing the guild sent a struggling rising star, Glico boldly declares she cannot let them fail alone. Glico grumbles about the pain of discovering far more giant trolls lurking in the dark than expected. The legendary adventurer turns sharply as a loud and agonizing cry suddenly echoes through the dense woods. Hearing the heavy thumping sounds, Glico curiously wonders if the noise belongs to the struggling rising star. A colossal giant troll roars furiously with its massive jaws wide open to devour the young boy. The young magic user rapidly unleashes powerful explosive spells to violently blast the massive creatures away. Watching the explosive combat, Glico notes the impressively skilled lad does not even look like a teenager. Glico remains stunned as the boy effortlessly obliterates the notoriously tough giant trolls with his massive spells. Glico internally questions how the frantic boy can possibly expel so much pure magic in one rush. The young boy breathes incredibly heavily and suddenly staggers forward as extreme exhaustion fully overtakes his body. The menacing giant trolls loom dangerously close as the exhausted boy collapses helplessly onto the forest ground. Glico swiftly steps out from the shadows and cheerfully asks the panting boy if he needs assistance. The exhausted young boy looks up with wide and tearful eyes at the sudden appearance of help. Staring closely at the boy makes Glico gasp and mistakenly assume he is her missing brother Yuri. She quickly shakes off the delusion because this strange lad completely lacks Yuri's face and hair color. The terrified lad screams for her identity, prompting Glico to proudly announce herself as the legendary spells word. The highly shocked boy whispers in absolute disbelief at meeting the #1 ranked adventurer in person. Trembling violently before her, the boy listens as Glico cheerfully claims she came to help him today. The blushing boy fiercely yells at the legendary warrior to step off and not steal his kills. Glico frantically protests his extreme rudeness while the stubborn lad aggressively demands she shut her mouth completely. Glico desperately screams for him to watch behind as a massive monster brutally strikes the young boy. Glico watches the boy, who calls out to a foul beast while aspiring for the top. The boy staggers but stubbornly declares he will not rest until he sits at the very top. Glico is chilled by the fact that someone so young has already reached the highest level of magic. Glico warns the boy to stop because unleashing magic at such close range will blow him to bits. A massive final explosion rocks the forest as the boy releases his most powerful and destructive magical technique. The terrain crumbles under the sheer force of the blast while dust and debris settle over the crater. Watching the aftermath, Glico wonders what drive could possibly push a boy to reach such incredible heights. Glico finds the boy unconscious and gently cradles him by the water while the forest remains still. The boy sleeps soundly while Glico observes his peaceful face during a quiet moment of recovery. Glico notes that seeing him now makes it hard to imagine him defeating all those giant monsters. The boy wakes up and nuzzles against Glico, prompting her to ask if he likes her abs. Startled by the sudden contact, the boy lets out a sharp cry of shock while Glico watches. Glico laughs heartily and tells the boy not to be shy about his natural interest in her. She explains that his interest in her bikini armor and sculpted physique is only natural for his age. The boy fidgets nervously and tries to stammer a correction while his face turns a deep red. Glico blushes and teases him to get his fill while the surrounding trees rustle in the breeze. Glico prepares to head off, but the hesitant boy asks her to wait for just one more moment. Glico smiles and asks if he would like to party up if it suits his particular fancy. She internally realizes she would regret it if she did not take this chance right then and there. The boy apologizes and explains he cannot join because his master is already waiting for him elsewhere. Glico is surprised as the boy happily declares he respects his master more than anyone in the world. Accepting the situation, Glico tells the boy there is no need to apologize for his loyal decision. The boy asks about her world rank and vows he will become number one himself someday soon. Glico smiles as the boy suggests they go on grand adventures together once he reaches the top. Glico laughs at his cheeky attitude and says goodbye as he prepares to head out on his way. Glico stops and asks for his name since she will not know when he becomes number one. She explains she must know his identity so she can recognize his success in future world rankings. Glico waits expectantly for an answer while the boy begins to introduce himself with a confident smile. The boy gives a thumbs up and proudly reveals his name is Mori Luckstrom, the combat wizard. A deeply blushing Chio nervously pins down Eiga and admits she still feels a bit scared. Taking off his shirt, Eiga decides to go back 1 month to explain this awkward situation. A beautiful and grand landscape shot beautifully reveals a peaceful shrine overlooking the vast rural village. Eiga heavily praises an incredibly skilled Miss Igarashi as she carefully brushes ink onto wooden boards. Eiga happily thanks the heavily blushing secretary for expertly drawing up the brand new bulletin boards. He plans to effectively communicate his true identity and future development goals to all local villagers. An older woman suddenly interrupts the busy group to politely greet Shohei's completely flustered young wife. The polite woman informs an incredibly surprised Eiga that a massive delivery has finally arrived outside. An incredibly excited Eiga beams with absolute pure joy upon hearing his highly anticipated delivery arrived. Eiga proudly inspects his massive and incredibly cheap bulk order of extremely high-quality combat equipment. An enthusiastic Eiga requests moving everything inside while the deeply concerned woman nervously hesitates to comply. Staring at the massive heap forces Eiga to embarrassingly admit he definitely ordered way too much. Eiga internally groans and bitterly complains because he desperately wants to avoid troubling his generous hosts. Igarashi suddenly appears directly behind him and strictly declares he absolutely requires a proper personal mansion. A highly shocked Eiga questions the grand idea while Igarashi firmly insists it is completely natural. Sweating profusely, a thoroughly confused Eiga nervously wonders exactly how he can even build a mansion. Igarashi smoothly offers to quickly point him toward the absolute best master carpenter within the village. Eiga asks Juzu about the incredibly steep construction prices while the old man confirms the cost. Eiga silently laments his sadly depleted funds before generously paying for the incredibly expensive new construction. Juzu suggests that owing the carpenter a massive future favor will dramatically speed up the construction. Eiga enthusiastically agrees with the clever plan as construction on his massive new mansion finally begins. A massive team of highly skilled carpenters vigorously works together to rapidly build the wooden structure. A deeply impressed Eiga watches the incredibly strong workers flawlessly hammer thick wooden beams into place. Eiga strategically places his new mansion south to stay safely away from the dangerous western monsters. He proudly visits the site today exclusively to inspect the newly completed and beautifully detached building. The brand new wooden training hall stands perfectly complete beneath the brightly shining sun and birds. Eiga falls completely backward in sheer absolute awe upon seeing the gorgeously equipped spacious training hall. Sitting comfortably near the smooth wooden doorway allows Eiga to happily appreciate the incredibly quiet atmosphere. Gazing thoughtfully out into the bright open courtyard prompts Eiga to quietly ponder his next move. A friendly and loud familiar voice suddenly calls out to the deeply surprised young lord today. An incredibly excited Chiyo rapidly grabs his arm and cheerfully celebrates his highly anticipated sudden return. Eiga internally identifies the energetic girl as the highly capable head of local village lumber transportation. A highly surprised Chiyo finally realizes he successfully ordered massive amounts of lumber for this place. Chiyo aggressively points at him and loudly demands to know if he is the new lord. The wooden bulletin boards proudly declare Lord Eiga fully intends to boldly conquer the monster territory. An incredibly annoyed Chiyo loudly scolds a deeply apologetic Eiga for actively hiding his true identity. Eiga smiles warmly and carefully asks if she also read about his ambitious monster clearing plan. Eiga earnestly leans forward and respectfully asks the highly talented girl to help him fight monsters. An utterly horrified Chiyo vehemently rejects the insane martial arts idea while frantically waving her arms. The deeply terrified girl loudly insists she only moves wood and absolutely cannot battle dangerous monsters. A deeply blushing Chiyo nervously questions why an ordinary villager should ever believe they possess weird potential. Chiyo admits she has zero confidence and unfortunately cannot help the young lord with his monster problem. The young lord smiles warmly and immediately tells the hesitant Chiyo that he has a great idea. Sitting comfortably inside the dojo, Eiga seriously asks Chiyo if she knows what training boils down to. He confidently explains that effective training always strictly follows demonstration, instruction and practice in that exact order. Eiga explains his unique possession skill while a deeply confused Chiyo tilts her head in absolute bewilderment. He notes shamans use possession to channel spirits but admits that advanced mystical technique exceeds his abilities. Eiga explains his true trick involves transferring his soul into a target using his intermediate job skills. He cleverly illustrates how transferring his soul into a martial artist gives their body raw physical experience. Eiga proudly reveals this exact possession method helped Tiana and Mori learn their respective techniques lightning fast. He honestly admits his first major drawback is completely failing to teach anything beyond his intermediate skill. Eiga sulks miserably while silently admitting his training skill quickly lost its purpose within the hero party. Looking deeply serious, Eiga reveals the second massive drawback involves an incredibly restrictive number of possession limitations. He firmly specifies needing a quiet and clean open space alone with his chosen target for training. A highly terrified Chiyo screams about ghosts while Eiga strictly demands her firm and completely unshakable consent. Eiga sympathetically understands how a sudden new lord shifting village resources toward monsters must feel incredibly perplexing. Staring forward with absolute fiery conviction, he passionately begs the young woman to simply believe in Takumo. He boldly declares his firm belief that this massive land possesses the undeniable potential for true greatness. Eiga vows to utilize all his skills because Takumo's great potential intimately begins directly with Chiyo herself. The determined young lord abruptly drops into a deep bow while desperately begging Chiyo for a chance. A deeply flustered Chiyo awkwardly laughs and admits seeing her lord bow so deeply feels completely wrong. Bending down respectfully, the blushing girl accepts his request while nervously warning she might simply disappoint him. Eiga happily declares consent acquired before his glowing spirit form suddenly drifts directly out of his body. The ghostly spirit form of Eiga politely asks for final permission before drifting closer toward the girl. Chiyo lets out a sharp gasp as the ghostly Eiga firmly pushes his spirit directly into her. Eiga gently reassures the deeply trembling young woman not to worry and to just relax her body. Chiyo violently squirms and cries out with an incredibly flushed face as the strange possession finally completes. A glowing aura completely surrounds her body as Eiga triumphantly announces he is successfully inside her now. The heavily breathing young woman completely collapses onto the wooden floor while panting in sheer absolute exhaustion. Eiga gently instructs her to try moving bit by bit while the girl twitches her fingers nervously. The possessed young woman staggers unsteadily onto her feet while Aga carefully tells her to remain steady. Aga internally complains about her heavy chest and tight clothing while an incredibly embarrassed Chio demands silence. Raising her bare fist with intense focus allows Aga to confidently announce he finally understands her body. The possessed girl violently unleashes an incredibly rapid flurry of devastatingly powerful punches across the entire dojo. Her tightly wrapped fist suddenly halts just millimeters above the wooden floor after a terrifyingly fast strike. A completely exhausted Aga abruptly exits her body while a heavily panting Chio instantly stumbles backward clumsily. He gently encourages her to physically twist her hips and thrust her fist just as he demonstrated. Chio aggressively screams and fiercely unleashes a powerful punch while Aga loudly cheers for her impressive form. The completely drained duo collapses flat onto the wooden floor while desperately gasping for much-needed air. Aga smiles brightly and proudly tells the deeply exhausted girl that she is actually incredibly physically fit. An intensely determined Chio silently faces the wooden training dummies while preparing for another brutal practice session. She fiercely launches an unbelievably massive blast of pure wind energy, completely annihilating the sturdy wooden dummy. Aga smiles proudly from the background while an utterly shocked Chio stares at her own trembling fist. The incredibly excited girl looks back at her smiling lord with eyes sparkling in pure absolute joy. Chio tightly clenches her powerful fist and intensely resolves to keep training her newly discovered martial skills. An incredibly cheerful Chio loudly thanks her young lord before happily sprinting away toward the setting sun. Watching her rapidly sprint away allows Aga to confidently conclude she will quickly become fully combat ready. Later that night, Garcia suspiciously notes a strange smell while an annoyed Igarashi intensely crowds the lord.